Welcome to Just for the Love of Reading, where we read books to inspire, motivate, and empower. Today's book in our book club series is titled Something Borrowed by Emily Giffin. This novel falls into quite a bit of genres, including romantic novel, chick lit, contemporary romance, psychological fiction, urban fiction, and humorous fiction. So Something Borrowed centers around the lives of childhood friends Darcy and Rachel, with Rachel being the narrator and the novel being written in first person. So these two have been childhood friends and they have reached their 30s. So it is the night of Rachel's 30th birthday, and they're all celebrating. And the novel starts out with the reader finding out that Rachel ends up becoming intimate with her best friend Darcy's fiance. Yeah. So, as the novel progresses, the reader really learns about how Rachel goes about her relations with her best friend's fiance as her best friend Darcy is planning her wedding. And being that they're besties, of course, Rachel is the maid of honor. So, the reader wants to know, at what point in the novel will Darcy find out about the betrayal from her best friend Rachel and her fiance Dex? Will it stop? Will Rachel eventually stop what she's doing with her best friend's fiance, or will it continue? How will this all unfold? And what is the fate of Rachel and Darcy's friendship? Also, will Rachel and Dex end up together? Let's start off by talking about Rachel and Darcy. So, Rachel and Darcy, as I mentioned before, have been childhood best friends, and they're now adults. Rachel is a lawyer, right, who works for a prestigious law firm in New York City. And I think it's fair to describe Rachel as a type A personality, very career oriented, very focused on her career, and just that's sort of how she describes herself and what she focuses on, right? Darcy, on the other hand, is a PR, and she is more outgoing than Rachel, right? Rachel would be considered more reserved, more passive. Darcy is the outgoing one, the go-getter, the one that goes for what she wants. She speaks her mind. She's unapologetic. She's very concerned about her appearance and, watches what she eats. She exercises. And so she's very focused on that. So as a reader, I already observed that Rachel and Darcy are two individuals who have polar opposite personalities, right? And I think it's important to mention because in a relationship, or especially in a friendship, I really do find that opposites attract, right? You usually have someone like Rachel who's more reserved and quiet, and then you have someone like Darcy who's more outgoing and a little more social, right? And so they combine together, and that's how the friendship dynamic works, right? So we learn that about the two characters. So the first thing that I'm going to start off with is by describing the friendship dynamic between Rachel and Darcy, right? You have the passive, reserved friend. You have the outspoken, social friend, right? And they join forces. And because the novel is written from the point of view of Rachel, we really get to see Rachel's view on their friendship, right? And this really plays an important role in how she goes about her indiscretion with her best friend's fiance. So Rachel always felt that she was in the shadow of Darcy, right? Since they were in elementary school and then in high school and as young adults, Rachel has always felt like she was in the shadows of her friend, right? And so as she goes about her relations with her friend's fiance, you really see that she starts to justify her behavior by bringing up points within their relationship where she felt that or led herself to believe that Darcy wasn't a good friend, right? So it started in elementary school where they both, Rachel liked this guy and Darcy knew that she liked this guy, and then all of a sudden one day Darcy said that she liked him and ended up dating him. And in Rachel's mind, Darcy just started dating him to prove a point that she could take the guy that she liked if she wanted to, in which she did. Then there's the example of when they were applying for universities and Rachel wanted to get into a specific university, and Darcy, and I guess there was a limited amount of space or a limited amount of applicants they would accept into that university. And then Darcy ended up applying to that university and getting in. And in Rachel's mind, she did it because she knew that I was applying there and wanted to get in, right? So the reader begins to feel or begins to understand that Rachel has always felt slighted in their relationship, and that she always felt that Darcy took things from her, that things that she wanted and desired the most. Rachel always also describes her relationship with Darcy as like one of those friendships where Darcy always had to one-up her, right? So for example, in high school, they took their SATs and it comes to find out that apparently Darcy lied about her SAT score just so that she can get a higher score than Rachel, right? So it was one of those, okay, well, what's your score? Tell me first. Rachel tells her score, and then Darcy ends up getting a slightly higher score, right? So Rachel in her mind has always felt this way about her friend, and so when she goes about betraying her friend by having relations with Darcy's fiance, these are the things that she tells herself, again, to justify her behavior. And yeah, so it's really interesting to see as the novel progresses the way in which Rachel decides to go about what she's doing, right? She doesn't feel the need to tell her friend what's going on. She doesn't feel bad about it. Again, she feels justified in doing so. And it's just, as the reader, you're reading this and you're just saying, oh my goodness, like, her friend is planning this wedding. Rachel's the maid of honor. She has no idea what's going on. And, it just gets really, really uneasy because you're just wondering, when is Darcy going to find out about this, right? So that's a very, a part in the story, in the novel, that builds a level of suspense, which I really did enjoy, because it's like you just never know, you never knew when the truth would come out in the novel. Now, as in any novel, there are always supporting characters in the novel that really, add to the plot of the story. So you have Rachel's mother, who, of course, knew Darcy from when Rachel and Darcy were children. And so Rachel's mom always just saw Darcy as that girl that had the world in her control, right? Like the world was her oyster sort of mentality, right? And so Rachel always just felt that like her mom not necessarily favored Darcy, but just had a level of admiration for Darcy that she didn't have maybe for her as her daughter. And then you have Rachel's friends, right? So she has her colleague Hillary, and then she has her childhood friend Ethan, who also knew Darcy. And those two play the role of a support system for Rachel, because they never tell her that what she's doing is wrong, right? They never tell her that the fact that she's betraying her best friend is wrong. They actually make her feel justified as well, right? In addition to Rachel's own reasons for doing what she's doing. In Ethan and Hillary's case, they're just more concerned with making sure that Darcy's fiance Dex, makes a decision, calls off the wedding, and ends up with Rachel, right? They just don't want to see Rachel hurt and let on. So you have these supporting characters who are, again, like I said, adding to Rachel's justification of what she's doing to her friend, right? And so, again, as the novel progresses, Rachel continues to have relations with Darcy's fiance, and it just continues to go on, and her friends are just letting her know, like, okay, if this is what you're going to do, make sure that he makes a decision and calls off the wedding so that he's not leading you on. Now, as I mentioned before, the novel is written from the point of view of Rachel, right? She's the narrator. And so, as the reader, it could be very easy for us to side with Rachel in the way in which she decides to go about having these relations with her best friend's fiance, keeping it a secret, and continuing with it, right? However, there are glimpses in the story that really show that, despite Darcy's personality and how the things that she may have done to Rachel, according to Rachel, Darcy was a loyal friend, right? No matter what she was going through, she never betrayed her friends, right? She was loyal to her friend. And you even have parts in the story where she really does support Rachel, right? By, admiring Rachel's work ethic and the fact that she was so, academically intelligent, when they went to their childhood friend's baby shower, really trying to defend Rachel, amongst their peers, and just, really just speaking on her behalf and saying, yes, Rachel's single and stuff, but she has a lot of options and she's doing just fine, right? So there's a lot of parts in the story where Darcy does show that she does care about her friend, right? However, again, it's easy for that part to be ignored because of the fact that the story is written from Rachel's perspective, right? And so, as the reader, I was able to notice those things, right? That Darcy, despite what Rachel said about her or the way that Rachel viewed her, she really loves Rachel, loved her, and really just, cared about her in her own way. With that being said, I don't want to dismiss Rachel's point of view on her relationship with Darcy because, there were so many things that happened throughout their friendship, from children to adulthood, that, definitely rubbed Rachel the wrong way and definitely led to some levels of silent resentment. And, I think there was a part in the story where Rachel was talking to this guy, Marcus, and Darcy made a comment like, don't mess this up because, he's going to be as good as you'll get. And, for someone to say that to their bestie, that's not nice, right? Okay, don't mess this up with this guy because you're not going to get any better. It's not nice, right? And I could see how Rachel would feel a little bit hurt, and that would be something that would add to whatever else she was feeling about her friend, and make her feel a little bit, upset or resentful towards her friend. So that's understandable, in that sense. So again, that was just another factor that, in my opinion, allowed for Rachel to justify in her mind what she was doing to her best friend. In my opinion, I think that the way in which Rachel spoke about her friendship with Darcy over the years really gave an insight into the way she felt about her friend, right? She really felt that her friend was the one that got the spotlight all the time. She was the favored one. She was picked all the time. She was the more outgoing one, the more attractive one, the more desired one. And so Rachel always felt this way about her friend. And the fact that the novel was written in the point of view of Rachel really plays a big role, because it's easy for the reader to get a biased opinion and side with Rachel. However, in my opinion, I believe that Rachel was a passive friend. Now, before I continue with that, I always believe that in every situation, it always takes two people. It's never just one person in a relationship dynamic, whether it's a man or a woman or two friends or, any relationship. It always takes two. In the progress of the relationship and also in the demise of the relationship. And I really just felt like Rachel was way too passive, and she never spoke up to Darcy. She never told Darcy how she really felt. She never called Darcy out on the things that made her uncomfortable and unhappy. And maybe Rachel was the confrontational friend, and she, was the passive friend, but it wasn't fair to Darcy for Rachel to keep all these thoughts bottled up inside without confronting her friend. And not to dismiss how Rachel felt, however, Rachel should have had some conversations with her friend and said, I didn't appreciate when you did this, or remember when you did this, I didn't like it. And so Darcy, in Darcy's defense, had no idea of how Rachel really felt about her, and all over all these years. And she thought that everything was fine. And so one thing that, again, that really, I guess, hit home to me or reminded me was the importance of, speaking up and letting your significant others or your friends know what's on your mind, talking about things, having those hard conversations, because, Rachel really justified her behavior. She betrayed her best friend in the worst way, and she justified it by listing all the things that happened throughout their relationship, throughout their friendship, and it just, in my opinion, was wrong. If something was bothering her, she should have spoken to her friend and found a way to communicate that to her friend, because Darcy thought that everything was okay. So that was something that really stood out to me, again, and allowed me to not follow the direction or the point of view of the narrator, which is so easy to do, right? In a story such as this one. So that's kind of, one of the things that I definitely took from their friendship dynamic. Okay, so now I'm going to give a little background information on Dex. So Dex is also a lawyer, and he met Rachel in law school, right? So they knew each other from law school. And it was actually Rachel who introduced Dex to Darcy. And then that's how they ended up dating and then getting engaged. And to me, as the reader, I didn't really want to focus so much on Dex, because I just felt like he was a reflection of the relationship that Rachel and Darcy had, right? I think, in my opinion, as the reader, the friendship dynamic was the most important. And I say this because their friendship was reflected in the way that Rachel decided to go about sneaking behind her friend's back with her fiancé, in the sense where, like, the way she decided to go about it, the way she felt justified in doing so. She proclaimed that she had a lot of feelings for Dex, and that she really cared about him, and that she believed that he should be with her and all that stuff. And if that were the case, the way she went about it was not right. The way she went about it was wrong, right? In the sense of the fact that she went behind her best friend's back. In my opinion, I think that the way in which Rachel spoke about her friendship with Darcy over the years really gave an insight into the way she felt about her friend, right? She really felt that her friend was the one that got the spotlight all the time. She was the favored one. She was picked all the time. You know, she was the more outgoing one, the more attractive one, the more desired one. And so Rachel always felt this way about her friend. And the fact that the novel was written in the point of view of Rachel really plays a big role, because it's easy for the reader to get a biased opinion and side with Rachel. However, in my opinion, I believe that Rachel was a passive friend. Now, before I continue with that, I always believe that in every situation, it always takes two people. You know, it's never just one person in a relationship dynamic, whether it's a man or a woman or two friends or, you know, any relationship. It always takes two. In the progress of the relationship and also in the demise of the relationship. And I really just felt like Rachel was way too passive, and she never spoke up to Darcy. She never told Darcy how she really felt. She never called Darcy out on the things that made her uncomfortable and unhappy. And maybe Rachel was the confrontational friend, and she, was the passive friend, but it wasn't fair to Darcy for Rachel to keep all these thoughts bottled up inside without confronting her friend. And not to dismiss how Rachel felt, however, Rachel should have had some conversations with her friend and said, I didn't appreciate when you did this, or remember when you did this, I didn't like it. And so Darcy, in Darcy's defense, had no idea of how Rachel really felt about her, and all over all these years. And she thought that everything was fine. And so one thing that, again, that really, I guess, hit home to me or reminded me was the importance of, speaking up and letting your significant others or your friends know what's on your mind, talking about things, having those hard conversations, because, Rachel really justified her behavior. She betrayed her best friend in the worst way, and she justified it by listing all the things that happened throughout their relationship, throughout their friendship, and it just, in my opinion, was wrong. If something was bothering her, she should have spoken to her friend and found a way to communicate that to her friend, because Darcy thought that everything was okay. So that was something that really stood out to me, again, and allowed me to not follow the direction or the point of view of the narrator, which is so easy to do, right? In a story such as this one. So that's kind of, one of the things that I definitely took from their friendship dynamic. So this ties into betrayal from a friend. Rachel betrayed Darcy in one of the worst ways. While Darcy was preparing for her wedding and making plans with her best friend and going shopping for this and that and talking to her best friend about things, her best friend was having relations with her fiance. And that, I just want everyone to just put yourself in Darcy's shoes for, if it's even 5 seconds. It's not right, no matter what. And I don't want to give any spoilers away, right, or tell you what happens, because I do recommend this book that you go and check it out and read it. But no, Darcy trusted Rachel, and this is how it ended up. Now, one might argue otherwise, but as a reader, that hit home to me in the level of betrayal, that you betrayed your best friend after all these years. On the flip side, one may say, you know what? It's about going after what you want and going out after what you deserve and what you feel is right for you. Rachel professed that she had really strong feelings for Dex and that she wanted to be with him and that she felt that they should be together. And so how does one go about that when you want something for yourself and desire something for yourself at the expense of hurting someone that you care about or someone that you've known for a long time, right? I think for me as the reader, that happens, right? I have to be aware and realize that, things like that do happen. As unfortunate as it is, things like that happen. So it's for me to think that it doesn't would be unrealistic. But I think for me, the way in which Rachel decided to go about it was not right. Right? If she really cared about Dex and really wanted to be with him and really felt that they belonged together, she could have handled that in another way. So it doesn't justify what she did or how she went about it. But if she really felt that she cared about this man, she could have dealt with it and handled it a lot better. Might I add that Something Borrowed is also in a movie. So some of you may have seen the movie already, which I haven't yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing it soon. But for those of you who have read the book, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Rachel and Darcy's relationship? What are your thoughts on Rachel's point of view? What do you think about the way in which Rachel decided to go about her indiscretions with her best friend's fiance? Right? What are your thoughts? Do you feel that she feels justified or that it could have been handled differently? And for those of you who have already watched the movie, does the movie tie into the novel? I don't know. I'm always weary about that. Does the movie do the novel justice? Or is it completely different? I don't know yet, but I would really like to hear your thoughts on this. I really enjoyed reading this novel because it was something different from the past two novels that I've read. So if you've seen my book reviews on the past two novels that I've read, they were a lot heavier and filled with a lot more depth. This one was definitely something different. It was a little lighter. It had a lot of great humor, which I appreciated from the author. And it was just one of those stories that are just, oh my goodness, it's very contemporary. And I just tried to put myself in both of their shoes while I was reading the entire novel. And so that was it was easier to do. So tell me what you think about the novel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.